And a very good evening, all. You're welcome along once more to the Irish F1 show in association with PFT Travel and Rapco. Check out PFT Travel on Facebook and check out Rapco on Facebook and indeed on Instagram as well. Some nice little neat and tidy wraps occurring over the last couple of weeks, I noticed there. Most notably, or one of the most notable ones being the Miji vans, which I saw entering Rapco HQ, and a fine job as well. And of course, if you need a lift anywhere at all, if there's a busload of lads heading off to a match or to a Grand Prix or anywhere, PFT Travel, definitely your go-to option. We're looking back on Abu Dhabi. We're going to look back on the season in general as well. We might come back and do a proper season review in a few weeks' time, but just to maybe delve into that ever so slightly. And of course, it is our last race review in general of the year. We've one or two other big interviews planned before the Christmas, and we're looking forward to getting those done and getting them shared. But in the initial intended format of the show, this may be actually it. So, strap yourselves in and we'll see what the next hour or so has to offer us. Richard Carney, unfortunately, is not with us this evening. Barry Rabbit is with us this evening, and Mike Dermody has joined us once more as well. Evening, gents. How are you?
All good, guys.
Even
nice to see you.
Barry.
Mike, your first two auditions have gone well, so we brought you back for the hat-trick.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Oh, man. And look, as you can see, Mike is well qualified to go on a podcast. You can see all the diplomas there behind him. no better vocal.
Yeah,
guys,
paper doesn't refuse ink, isn't that it?
I have to be blunt and be honest. A bit of a snooze fest, I think, on Sunday. We have obviously sentimental things to talk about. We'll probably go back to Max and Checo. We've done our homework, we've done our sums. We did get a few people in touch with us as well who felt that we were maybe a little bit too kind to Max on last week's episode, and that's good. Get in touch with us. By all means do. Irish F1 Show is our handle on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram, and you can email us irishf1show@gmail.com as well. Lads, general observations on the weekend. Mike, I'll start with you.
An uneventful race, I think, is the easiest way to describe it. At one stage in the middle of the race there, I had a sort of an image of Max cruising along with his arm out the window, getting a farmer's tan. He was able to go that slow to save his tyres, and he was still matching the lap times of the guys, giving socks behind him. I thought the start of the race, I was very disappointed with Checo. Lap one, turn one, lights out, away we go. Max leaves that inside channel open. Checo has a look in and then lifts off. Not the ambitions of a guy looking to get out in front and do damage and claim second in the championship. So the start of the race disappointed me from that perspective. I'm sure we'll talk more about Checo's performance throughout the whole race in a while. But an uneventful race really. Other than that, there was a bit of place swapping going on down the grid. Most of it was done during undercuts or overcuts. I can't remember any fantastic particular overtaking moves that stand out for me. I don't know. Barry, you might have a different view.
No, kind of same as that, Mike. It's it was, like you said, it was a race where it didn't seem to be, no matter how slow Verstappen went, he still kept leading the race comfortably. I don't think he was doing that on purpose or anything. His pace was on purpose, but he wasn't trying to back up or anything. It's just preserving tires, as you say. Something that Max is probably, not incorrectly not well known for, but he is good on saving the tires. But he has this kind of aggressive demeanor as well that kind of, I suppose, takes most people's memory. It was a fairly uneventful race. I suppose funny though, funny few little things were like Hamilton at the start kind of looked to be moving forward and then ended up kind of getting caught back again by Sainz and stuff, and Russell was slower then and then he was faster, so a little bit funny, but I think that was maybe lads just trying to life their tires differently. But yeah, nothing too hectic to report. If it wasn't for the fact that there was P2 in the championship to settle, even Checo chasing down Leclerc at the end was, any other race, if it was just for that position, it wouldn't have even been a highlight. I think the fact that it was for P2 added a little bit of glamour to it, but not enough, I don't think. Generally, a pretty poor race to end off the season, unfortunately.
Yeah, bit of a damn squid, I think. I'm going to pick up on something that Mike said there, Barry, and it's in relation to that start and the lack of intent, I suppose. Checo didn't obviously go for it. He did pull back a little bit. And would that be, I suppose, in one single moment, a summary of the gap between, it's probably unfair to say, Verstappen and him, but the actual top drawer driver and him? Is moments like that an example, or is that too harsh?
I don't think it's too harsh. I think what you have as well is, I mean, Bottas was not to immediately just go to another driver, but Bottas was probably the best example recently on the grid of a very, very fast driver, but not a particularly good, if that's not too generic a term, racing driver. He was very, very quick, but he didn't have that killer instinct to go for gaps. And we still see that he's still very fast, very extremely fast in the Alfa Romeo on occasion, but generally loses positions on the opening laps. And we have these two. It's almost a personality type thing, as much as anything else. So there's two different things. Driving a race car as fast as possible is one set of skills. Driving as fast as possible and being an aggressive overtaker and a good racing driver is another thing. And I think what you have with Checo is someone who's an exceptionally good driver, but sometimes, not always, not as much as say Bottas is, but can sometimes be just that little bit weak-willed when it comes to throwing the car down a small gap. And of course, being teammate to Verstappen, who's about the polar opposite of that when he needs to be, will only make that more obvious.
Mike, just on Checo as well, it's a point that I know you really wanted to make when we were chatting beforehand, in relation to the battle for second. You felt that maybe, and if I'm misrepresenting you, by all means let me know, you felt perhaps a bit of Ferrari misfortune is the reason why he was actually in the position to possibly finish second in the first place. You stand by that now that we're live on air?
I do, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I don't. If you look on the season as a whole, from race 1 to race 22, and you look at the performance, in honesty, Checo was in with a shout going into the last race for P2 because Ferraris, particularly around their strategic or lack of strategic management in earlier races that had cost Leclerc. Had that not happened, I don't think that Checo would have been in with a ghost chance going into race 1 of finishing P2 in the championship. He's just not good enough. If you compare Leclerc and Checo together, had neither driver finished that race, Leclerc was still going to win that P2 by virtue of more wins, by a better record on track. I think he was very fortunate to be in the position of fighting for P2 going into the last race, and I think, had it not been for Ferrari's own faux pas, I doubt that he would have been there, quite honest. There was never any doubt about who was going to win that title. I mean, Max won it hands down. But the P2, I think it was flattering Checo a little. When you look back, I sat back on Sunday evening and I looked at, after the race was over, and I was watching the last couple of laps with interest. Even take that particular point. He came in for his second set of tyres. He went back out. He needed to be pulling a lap out of Charles, and Charles was on all rubber. And he wasn't until his race engineer came on the blower and sort of gave him the hurry up and said, "Get your finger out, for Jesus Christ. You're going to, you have to catch this guy." And then later on, he says, "You're going to catch him on the last lap. Brilliant. You'll get him." Like, honestly, doesn't show enough ambition. Didn't show any ambition for me, for a guy that really wanted it that bad. And I don't think he deserved it over the course of the season.
Barry, could you argue anything in regards to the Red Bull strategy the other day in pit stops to maybe have a different situation, just in terms of the other day only?
Yeah, I think it was a very weird situation. What actually happened was, by virtue, I think Verstappen's strategy actually hurt Checo Perez more than anything else, because Verstappen was driving at such a slower pace than need be, that the Ferraris were able to hold the gap without driving ultimately as fast as they might have had to keep that gap. So by virtue of Verstappen driving slowly, the Ferraris didn't have to push as hard, which then in turn meant that they didn't have the same degradation that they normally would have. And then it was that lack of degradation and that sustained pace that the Ferraris normally do suffer from. That meant that they were able to do the one stop and ultimately stay ahead of Perez. So inadvertently, I think Red Bull, by putting Verstappen on the one stop, slowed the pace of the race down, saved the tires on the Ferrari, and then Checo didn't have enough laps to come back at him. So I think it was definitely, I think Ferrari got the right strategy, which is an unusual thing to say this year. And in a funny kind of way, I think Red Bull actually shot themselves in the foot in terms of Perez. But I don't think. I mean, to echo what Mike said, I don't think Perez really deserved P2 in the championship ultimately. Considering the equipment he had at his disposal compared to Leclerc's equipment and team, it had all the looks that I don't think Red Bull were too pushed about P2 either. We kind of thought that from earlier in the season where they did, in Brazil and Mexico and stuff, it didn't seem to be too much of an effort. They said all the right things then about after Brazil, saying that they were gonna do what they could to get Perez the P2. And as I said last week, there's not actually a whole lot they could have done. The one thing they could have done is let them swap positions off the line, let Perez lead the race, and then swap it back at the end and put Verstappen in ahead of him and Perez guaranteed second. But I just don't think there was really any appetite there for P2 from Red Bull. I think there was from Perez, but not enough, as Mike says.
I don't know even that, because if you look at the interview when Jenson Button interviewed him after the race, in Parc Fermé almost, he was all smiles. He looked very relaxed. He didn't, I know a lot of drivers would be very critical of their own performance in that situation, even in Mondello Park, that they felt maybe they didn't try hard enough. He just didn't seem to it didn't seem to bother him that he had to have the hurry up from his engineer. I mean, you take your point about the one stop strategy and everything else that worked. There was a few other cars went out on a one-stop strategy, and it failed miserably for them. Right? Kevin Magnussen started on a one-stop strategy. That was clear. That got abandoned very quickly, and I think one of the Alphas might have had as well from memory, but I think Bottas might have had. But
Vettel did a one-stop as well, and
Vettel, and it didn't work for them.
Wasn't impressed, yeah.
Didn't work for them, right? So your point is very well made. But by the same token, you got the early part of the race. You've got Checo complaining that he's dealing with the wash from Max's car, but he's more than 2 seconds behind him. He's not even able to. Max is going easy, and he's not even able to get close enough where he can open the rear wing, get a bit of drag resistance, and get pulled along. And he's got a full fuel load, and he's absolutely, hammering his tires, which means he has no choice but to do two stops. And yet,
that was the opportunity, Mike, surely for Red Bull to let Perez go ahead of Verstappen on his two stop, because you could say that Verstappen was hurting Perez by driving in front of him, maintaining tires when Perez didn't need to, and then Perez actually, opened up his front tire early on. I think it was lap 14 or something, as a result of being behind Verstappen and overworking the front. And Perez is probably better on rear tires than front tire preservation. This tire whisper thing, he's very good on throttle application. But it was his front tire that opened up after about lap 14 that prompted the pit stop. So again, I just get the feeling that he was not deliberately, but he was almost sabotaged by Verstappen's strategy. He was held up by him initially. The Ferraris were able to preserve their tires by the slower pace. Verstappen was ahead of Perez, and therefore throwing that wash over the car, which will hurt the front tires because it's scrubbing instead of gripping with the dirty air, which prompted him into quite an early pit stop. So again, it just didn't seem like all they had to do there was say, right, let Perez by, let him get his head down. He's on a two stop. He needs to bolt, get away, and then we can swap it around later if need be. And that puts Verstappen in between him and the Ferrari, and then they just swap it back on the last lap and job done. I just don't think there's any appetite. But no, to be honest, I think in most championships, and most drivers' point of view, there is very little appetite for finishing second. To be honest, it's especially in a championship point of view. In a race, maybe slightly different if you're charging forward, but a championship to finish second, it's a thing of nothing, really. And I don't think especially in F1 guys are not going to be too bothered about it, and that's just a feeling I got from it. I think Leclerc maybe did want it because he worked so hard for it. They worked against his own team to try and get it. But I think in general, second in the championship is, meh, whatever. And I think that just kind of came across across the board at the weekend.
Probably not relative, Barry, to the standards that you'd expect. I mean, it's realistically just meeting expectations considering the machinery. So it's not like someone's come and way surpassed the expectations of the team and of the driver. So, and ultimately there's not the chauffeur. So
and Perez is not like the team isn't built around Perez finishing second. The team is built around Verstappen winning the championship. They've done that. Mission accomplished. Sure, if they get second, grand. But we're not going to risk a Max win over it. And we're not going to be too much bothered about putting a whole load of systems in place. If it works, it works, and that'll be great. And if it doesn't, well, sure, Max still won 15 races, so that's what everyone will remember. And they don't want, and you got to bear in mind also, Red Bull don't really want a driver any better than Perez. He suits perfectly. He's not a threat to Verstappen. He's quick enough to kind of get in the mix and take a few points off the rest of them. And that's all they want from number two driver, being no impression otherwise that they're looking for someone to be pushing Verstappen up the road. It's not what they want.
Any thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, no. Look, it smacks. It stands out. It's glaringly obvious, isn't it? It's glaringly obvious. The driver himself didn't have an appetite. The team didn't have an appetite. I think it was just they were just saying things for the sake of saying it, just to keep fans happy and stuff like that.
Fully
question
agree.
Is Checo's reputation as a tyre whisperer overrated? He opened up 2 sets of tyres, and contrary to his claim, Max backed them up. It was how he handled the tyres. We've kind of touched on that a little bit, I think.
Well, one is, I mean, it's cause and effect. If you're in dirty air, you're going to work the tyres, especially the front tyres, an awful lot harder, and that will cause them to open up. And as I said, if you look back, one of the Perez on the tyre end of thing, it's his. If you're real born and get into the data and stuff, I've seen some interesting articles on it. His throttle application is particularly, very, very finessed. It's very good, and that will save the rear tires more so than fronts. But fronts, there's not a whole lot you can do with. The fronts is down to, if you don't have the aero going over the front wing, you got to work the tire harder. You're going to overheat it. You're going to grain it. You're going to open it up. And that's what we've seen at the weekend. So. Mostly caused, I would say, by dirty air off the back of Verstappen.
Yeah.
To pick up on just a couple of things, and I know we spent a lot of time talking about Red Bull, right? I'll come to the press release first, or later, I should say, but I want to touch on something else first, and I was fucking raging over this, because Barry, I'd like to go back maybe and just get the reference, and this is before I had my exact homework done on the point situation. We spoke after the race the other day, and you said Max is going to get tore apart. And I said, to a certain degree, justifiably so, I think, Barry, he couldn't see past his own ego last week, even taking Monaco into account. It was still bruised ego syndrome over that, which made him do what he did last week. And I still stand by that part. But where I'm wrong here is that it has played a big part in costing his team a 1-2 in the overall standings. That's incorrect, because I did the maths. And if they had a reverse positions last week, Leclerc is still second by a point. And before I finish talking, there is a few people that did get in touch with us in relation to that, saying we were too kind to Max last week. So any thoughts on that now a week later? I'm standing by my opinion, but I'm not a racing driver. You think differently, as I came to discover live last week.
I think to kind of reiterate what we said a while ago, I think we're probably making it too complicated and too many layers on it and everything else. For whatever reason, Max felt that he had to get one back on Perez. That he had to, he owed him one. Let's call it that way. He owed him. He done something. We're presuming it's Monaco. Perez did something that pissed off Max. And Max just said, that's fine. Someday I'll get my revenge on it. And that's all
Is that childish, though, lads? No? Like, they're grown men. Two wrongs don't make a right.
No, I know, but you see, it's all power plays and all sorts of stuff, and you can't take the, you can't in one sense, applaud the aggressiveness of Verstappen and the pace that he has and all this sort of thing, and right, put them all in the good column, and then say, oh, and then he can be a bit angry and he can be this and he can be a bit feisty and put it in the bad column. You get what you get. That's it. It's not an a la carte menu. You can't pick this off that menu and that off this menu. This is what you're getting. That's it. And you get the good with the bad. And the bits that make him good on one side and aggressive and everything else. As I said before, remember the lap last year that he threw away in the last corner or whatever, was it Doha or whatever, the very last corner, he threw it off. And everyone's saying, oh, he should have just held back and, just he had the point.
Style.
And just get it across the line. The point is that if he even considered that as an option in his head, if that was even open to him, and it's not, he wouldn't have been in a position in the first place to have that pocket of time to hold back. You can't have it both ways. So he was just, what gives him that hunger to win races in cars that aren't really good enough to win races, which is not this year, of course, but last year and previous years, he was the only one that could put it up to Hamilton and Mercedes in general, because he brought something more to the party. The same thing that was the moreness there is the same thing that it comes from the same place with him, that he just goes, Perez did me wrong, I'm going to get him back. It's the two sides of the same coin, and you can't say to somebody like Verstappen and say, right, we want. But you imagine if you're Christian Horner and you go to him and you go, okay, Max, so new plan. All the stuff that makes you really, really fast. Well, we want all of that, and the stuff that kind of makes you a little bit temperamental or holding grudges. We want none of that. You can't do that of any person in life. It's
you can't. But you can get him to fucking follow a team order, surely.
No, you can't.
No, but hold on, Kev. How many? We'll switch codes for a second, and we'll go soccer, we'll go football, right? We'll talk about Eric Cantona, right? When he in Crystal Palace, when he cleared the hoarding and kung fu kicked your man in the chest because he was goading him from the side. We talk about the amount of times Roy Keane absolutely pulled off something stupid, but people accepted that was part and parcel of what made them exceptionally talented at what they do. And if it's acceptable, it's acceptable. Cantona, but that's what makes him so good. This is the point Barry is trying to make here with Max.
Yeah, that's
and
fair
it's
enough.
It's not that it's acceptable. I've heard of the two people you mentioned. I think they play soccer or something in red jerseys, but they sorry, I'm being facetious. Of course, I heard of the two lads you mentioned, but look, it's never acceptable to kung fu kick someone over a fan, right? It's not acceptable, but you can, as Mike says, you can see it's part of the same process. That means the next day he goes out and he goes for the ball that the other 10 players on his team won't go for. So you got to take the rough with the smooth side of it. In a perfect world, if you were to take the perfect racing driver, you take the kind of, the good attributes from all of them and you'd place them into one driver, but it's never going to happen. It's never, people say, oh, well, Perez would have, Perez gave him the position point back and all. You go, Perez is 0.3 of a second slower than him, though. Every lap of every race, doesn't go for gaps. So which do you want? Do you want the Verstappen or do you want the Perez?
Put it into context, right? Put it into context. Perez is trying to chase down Leclerc. He's got new rubber. He comes up behind Hamilton, who's on a one-stop strategy as well, who's absolutely doing his best to keep the car stuck to the road where he can. And Hamilton obviously had a little wry smile on his face, and he was a little bit of payback perhaps from last season.
Exactly, 12 months back.
But he I mean, what did he take? 2.5, 3 laps to get past him?
Yeah, I think. And I'm trying to remember. Did he outbrake himself and let him back by him, or was that someone else?
He did. Little lock up on you.
And he got the switch back and let him back up the inside. So as I said, it's not. I don't think anyone to the people who are saying we're being kind to him or whatever else. Look, I'm not saying that he's the nicest human being going or all these sort things, and forget that. I don't care who nice or whatever. We're classing them as racing drivers, and of course personalities and different things come into it. But what makes Verstappen so lethal in a car, and I mean that not in that he'll take you out of a corner, but literally lethal from a point of view of giving him a car that is halfway capable of winning, and he will make it win. Just as the Hamiltons of this world, just as the Alonsos in other ways, just as the Vettels, all these guys will take something and get more from it than they really should. There is another side to that type of personality, and it comes out from time to time. And should we accept it? Should we just brush past it? And no, we shouldn't. And we should. And you should go, yeah, you're a bit of a bollocks for doing that, but that's who he is. And from a team manager's point of view, would you really want to knock that edge off him for fear of it also knocking the other side off him that gives you the 3/10 of a lap? Or would you just go, you know what, as an overall package, this is fine. Don't upset the apple cart too much, and we'll just have to live with the fallout once a year.
I mean, you take the same team a few years ago, right? When it was Verstappen and the Aussie. What was his name?
You mean Vettel and Webber?
Or Vettel and Webber, sorry, yeah.
Yes,
Vettel and Webber, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Seb's hanging up the driving gloves now, and everyone's saying, what a lovely fella, what a great guy he is.
I hated him a few years ago.
Yeah. A few years ago when he and Webber were going at it in the same team, I can remember one particular race where they took each other out. Another race where Seb was told not to hold station and not to overtake Webber, finish 1-2, and he just basically put a middle finger up to everybody and said, I'm a fucking racing driver and that's what I'm here to do, and he just done it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly right. That's what it is. And you can't, you know, that's what it is. You take it or you leave it. And you just live with, all the upsides and a few of the downsides. And it's the same, it's the same thing that makes them go for the gaps and whatever else. So again, just reiterate, we're not making excuses for him. We're not justifying what he did. But I think it's
Can I cut across here now, Barry? I actually want to cut across you purposely.
Go.
Would you have given him the place back last week? We'll finish on this. Would you have given Perez the place last week?
If I was Verstappen, I wouldn't have, because I was Verstappen. If Barry Rabbit, probably.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, if it's Barry Rabbit driving for Red Bull and Perez is your teammate, even considering all past events, if you want to bring Monaco into it, would you actually give the place to him?
Yeah, I personally probably would, but I'd see that just as much a weakness as a strength. Yeah, because I know that that would mean that I don't have that rootlessness that maybe I would need on the other 15 races of the year.
Okay,
you see?
Mike.
So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, Mike.
I'd have to think very hard about it, and I'm not going to lie to you. Right, and out of the three of us that'd be on here now, the two guys would be the racing drivers, and I'd be like bringing up the rear gunner a lot of the time. Maybe that's why I'm so used to looking at other people's gearboxes. To have to look at yet another gearbox would sicken me, to be honest with you. And I'd be inclined to say probably not. No, probably not.
Right, that's fair. So I'm in this case, I'm putting this a little bit to bed. But it does segue us into the press release that Red Bull were forced to put out there, which has inconsistencies. And I know this is 4 or 5 days old, but we've only got the opportunity to come to it now. So to suggest that, and let me just get the quote, and this is taken from the press release. Regretfully, Max was only informed at the final corner of the request to give up position without all the necessary information being relayed. That's factually incorrect. Okay? Who do they think F1 fans are in this day and age? We know the message is delayed by 60 seconds approx, or in around that time frame anyway. What did they think they were going to achieve by this, guys? Like, I mean, it's already a shitty enough situation. And we should add, also in the press release, nobody wants to see hate, obviously, be it at Verstappen, be it at Perez, be it at anyone's family. But if I'm involved in Red Bull now and that's gone out, I'm grabbing my PR person and saying, what the fuck? We're already in a bit of a shitstorm here. Yes, it's probably great for the brand. As we said previously, there's clicks. Everyone's talking about Red Bull. Sure, this isn't a great. Red Bull are delighted. But as a team and how it's perceived, not good, guys. That's my opinion anyway. Any thoughts? Mike, I'll start with you.
Well, I read, funnily enough, an old friend of ours put a comment on a clip where Christian Horner had at the after party Sunday evening, and he had his left arm around Verstappen and his right arm around Vettel, and it was, the greatest Red Bull drivers, etc., etc. And a friend of ours put up a post that said, more like a manager who couldn't control either of his two drivers.
Yeah.
Right. And that there could be an element of that to it. So what did we put out in the media then? Sure, we told him to do it. He wouldn't do it. We're very upset with him. We don't know what now we're going to do next.
I'd just leave out that line. I'd probably just leave that line out. I wouldn't even bring attention to it, or else say just leave it out altogether. Do you know what I mean?
It was definitely a bit of a faux pas to include the line in the first place, but
it was.
They have to put something out. They're probably, F1.
The release is fine.
Drivers,
it's just that line.
It's just that line.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know, and it kind of just gave them another. To be perfectly honest, and here's maybe a bit of a shock. They probably just don't care, Kev. You know what I mean? Like they're living in a bit of a bubble and maybe a bit of a vacuum, and they're just, yeah, sure, we'll type this out and we'll get away with it, and be grand, and it'll all blow up. But if we write anything else, and like you said, well, we told Max not to do it, and he went and did it anyway, this scoundrel. Like they're not going to write that. So, they probably had a fairly limited kind of range of things they could say, and they're probably like, oh, we probably won't get away with this, but it's better than the truth, So, and yeah, I don't think there's any managing of a driver, and you're not going I think to be fair to the likes of Horner and some of the other team bosses, they know trying to control a Max Verstappen in a race car at 200 mile an hour is an absolute exercise in futility. They know that, in Horner's case, he raced to a reasonably high level himself as a driver to F3000, and wasn't, was no Egypt in a car. He didn't get to F1, but a lot of people don't get to F1, but he was no Egypt in a car. And he just realizes this is, why bother trying to, creating havoc and friction, asking someone who's the most highly prized asset in the Red Bull company, next to maybe Adrian Newey, or certainly in the top 3 or 4 of the whole operation. Why try and cause friction there when it's ultimately not going to work? This is what he has. He's they'll do their best within a certain amount of circumstances, and he's smart enough to know that and not to push too hard. And he's not the only one. Like there would have been cases with Hamilton, and you go back to your Schumachers and your Sennas and Prost, and there's loads of history of that sort of stuff going on. So I don't see it as a weakness. If anything, I'd see it as a bit of a strength to know what's the saying, control the things you can, and just to serenity to live with those that you can't. And I think there's probably a lot of that in case when you're trying to run an F1 team with Max Verstappen's and Lewis Hamilton's and whoever else.
I mean, look at it like this, right? Look at it like this. Any other team manager, even as far down as Williams or Haas, would love to have Max Verstappen in their car.
It's a great problem to have, isn't it?
Wouldn't it? Huh? Absolutely.
It's a first world problem for a team boss, to try and slow him down, and that's what he's there for. So, and okay, we're talking about Verstappen here because he's he's the current champion. He's the race winners, most popular race winner, not most winningest race driver this year. But this isn't new stuff, This is going on and on for as long as I've been watching F1, which is a year or two. So, I think it's just. I think maybe it's in a lot of these cases I think people are expecting and kind of asking for the complete impossible, and saying like, why didn't Horner do this to Verstappen on the phone, on the radio to him, and why didn't he do that, and why did it's not going to work. You at least have he has the knowledge to know it's not going to work, so don't do it. And live with what you got.
Next point of reference actually is the win percentage, which you kind of touched on there. And Max has obviously broken a record for 15 wins. However, it's still not the highest win percentage. Schumacher, 13 out of 18, I think, in a season. And it's an awful pity Richie's not here because he'd absolutely love this. 72.22% Schumacher's win percentage. Max, I think it was somewhere around 67 or 8 or something like that.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah,
and
which is third because Vettel, I think, is on 70-ish.
1952. Alberto Ascari, 6 out of 8 races, 75%. He's just been dropped out. It's out of all the stats. I seen that one myself the other day. And Ascari won 6 out of 8 and 52, which is 75%. So everybody seemed to have forgotten about him. I don't know why. I mean, yeah, it's interesting.
Jeez,
and it was
curveball there now.
yeah. I seen that, I won't pretend to remember the exact figures, but I knew Ascari had a very high percentage rate going back that long, and I looked it up and it was 75, and I went, maybe that's before there was the official World Championships, but it's not. I believe 1950 was the first World Championship, so don't know why that one's been forgotten. I know 6 out of 8 is not necessarily the highest numbers going, but if we're talking percentages, it is a higher number.
Max also had 2 very early in the season. It was in Bahrain, and didn't he had fuel pump or fuel injection fuel starvation issues or whatever.
Lack of fuel.
A lack of fuel, yeah. He had 2 DNFs, so he finished 20 races.
So busy buying dinners, Barry.
Well, yeah. I believe that was a bit of an own goal from Red Bull, according to a source who remained nameless, who has a bit of inside info in Red Bull. I think that was a bit of an own goal at the start of the season.
But you can bend stats any way you like. If you take out those 2 races because they weren't his fault, out of the 20 races he did finish, he won 75% of those.
Yeah. Well, you could probably apply the same to Schumacher and Vettel as well. I don't know this, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of races in a season. Is 15 out of 23 harder than 6 out of 8? I don't know. But
or 13 out of 18. Yeah.
Guys,
on the season in general, and I was just thinking back on this because 3, 4, 5 races in, this is a genuine conversation about Leclerc and Verstappen and how it drastically changed in around, I suppose, the middle part of the season onwards, you could say, and how quickly things just became one-way traffic. It was disappointing from that point of view. I need to go back and check my statistics, but is that the earliest an F1 Drivers' Championship has been tied up?
No, I think one of the Schumacher eras was tied up. I couldn't tell you the amount of races, but sooner. I think August or something. Now the season had a different timeline, but I think somewhere around August one of the years, with about five races still to go, Schumacher wrapped it up out of a 17 round championship or something like that. So, but it'd be up there. It'd be in the top few. Yeah,
I think the year Mansell won it. I think he had it wrapped up very early as well, didn't he?
In 92,
he would have done that. Barry, you hate stats though. There's no point in me doing that.
Yeah. Well, the stats. They're interesting stats. This is the 4,025th lap for someone to lead in a red car. Shut up. Sorry, this doesn't matter. It's a crap they come out with. It's anyway.
Yeah,
too much here already.
Moving on, lads. Moving on. We have a little bit to look back on, right? But obviously, in the last couple of days, we've had post-season testing as well. Alonso got a spin out of the Aston Martin, unbranded, obviously.
Playing green.
For contractual reasons there. Can I just ask for someone who doesn't have any great deal of knowledge, what are they actually doing with that? What's achievable? Is the cars not naturally going to change anyway? What is it? I'm just trying to understand what's the point of it, really.
The end of season testing, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, every lap you do in any race car has a benefit. Some more than others, but there's definitely a benefit to be had. It could be, and I'm really just speculating here wildly. You put Fernando Alonso into your car. He drives the car. There's a good chance the car has a trait that he either likes or doesn't like, and he will. He will kind of
feedback to the designers and stuff for next year.
Yeah, he'll relay that back one way or the other. He'll relay it back. Go, look, a car is doing this. That happened to me 4 years ago in that car, and this is how we got around it. And I don't particularly like that. I mean, I don't know what they're doing, but you can be damn sure they'll get some nugget of information out of it that may not be positive or may not have a massive value today, but in time it could have. So, every lap is important as you can get something from it.
But they were also running some Pirelli are bringing sort of slight changes, new changes to the tire, to the rubber for next year, and I know that part of this week's testing is running that rubber to see for feedback for Pirelli.
Yeah, so there's loads of opportunities there to. Plus, the other thing is if it's end of season testing, they can be a little bit more flexible with what they try. I mean, if you've got a race coming this weekend and you're like, right, we have a testing program, we need to follow this, and we don't want to go too wildly off script, just in case we lose our way a bit and can't get back with setup or such. Whereas if it's the end of the season, you go, that thing that we were wondering all year if it would work, let's give it a shot and see what, it's a bit of a wild one. Let's try it. They probably won't, So there's a few different angles, I'd say, to exploit. And every lap, there's something to be learned from every lap, I think, in any race car.
Sebastian Vettel, guys, will we see him back? Any observations? How can someone become just so universally popular? Is it because simply he wasn't winning races? What's the crack? You know what I mean? It seems to be the biggest outpouring of emotion, almost, I would say, up there anyway, with any driver that's ever left F1.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, as a person, he's probably grown like, we all do, and I don't think to say he's mellow, that would probably be doing him a disservice, but I think it's just media crap, to be perfectly honest. He's probably not that different a person that he was 10 years ago or whatever it was when he was just wiping the floor of everybody. And it's kind of build them up, knock them down kind of thing that we've seen from various media. And, the British media that we watch is generally known for that across all sports and celebrity and stuff. We're not great with it in this country either, with the build them up and knock them down sort of attitude. But it's, I think a lot of that is just media driven, and then if you're of course the other thing is if you're in the limelight, if you're in the limelight for winning races, if you scratch your ear the wrong way, someone's going to read something into it, and he's doing that because of this and he's doing that. Whereas if you're a little bit in the shadows, as Sebastian has been lately, he's not under the same scrutiny for every action he makes or every move he does on track, and only the kind of more bigger picture stuff might come through, which is probably a better reflection on any of them on the grid, to be fair. So I don't think he's a different person or anything. I think it's just probably not under the same silly levels of scrutiny.
Mike?
Yeah, look, I'd agree with that. Will we see him back? It's hard to say, right? I doubt it. I don't want to use Barry's terminology from a few weeks ago, but he's going to go off and hug a few trees and do what makes him feel good, right? Will he come back? I don't know. Maybe if he does, it might be when Audi joined the foray, and they might talk him into it then, depending on what's around him. There's no doubt they'll want a German driver, I don't think, but it'll depend on who's there and what they're doing. But it's hard to see. It's really hard to see him coming back. I mean, I suppose, look, being a complete bollocks about this, he probably couldn't wait to get out of Aston Martin, having to wipe Lance's nose on every occasion, and every time he did try and do something decent in the car, if Lance was around him, Lance tried to put him in the wall or do something stupid with him anyway, and just drove at him because he knew he could, because Daddy's checkbook said so,
Yeah.
So like he's probably delighted to step back from that. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, Kevin. You go to the sprint race in Brazil when he went to overtake his teammate, and his teammate shoved him out on the grass at 180 mile an hour. Like he was so lucky,
He won't miss that. He won't miss that bit of it.
He won't miss that. He won't miss that. And then even on Sunday, right? He complained about that they fucked him up with a one-stop strategy, and they actually shot themselves in the foot by doing it, because had they put him on a two-stopper and had he finished in front of Ricciardo instead of behind him, they would have put $12 million in the bank that they don't have today.
Yeah, For sure. I don't think he'll come back. I think I think the difference you've seen with people that's come back lately is, Alonso is the big one. Obviously, he's what is he, 41, 42, maybe, going continuing on. But Alonso is a full on, like, racing is his life. So far, and like, I'm not one for knowing all the wags and the kids and all the rest of it. But as far as I'm aware, he's a single man. He's no kids. Racing is it. That is absolutely it for Alonso. He will drive anything that you ask him to, and he gets a massive enjoyment from it. I think Vettel and others like him have got more aspects to their life, and he won't get as bored as quick. Definitely not if he's got 3 small kids running around him, which I believe is the case. So he's got plenty of other options to do. So he probably won't, that boredom probably won't kick in as quick as it would for the likes of Alonso's and stuff. But having said that, I would be surprised to not see him in a race car again. We know he has a massive appreciation for the history of the sport. I think we all see that thing before, where he named every world champion from 1950 through to the current day, which is, you don't do that by accident. That's a real connoisseur of the sport. And we know he owns a couple of classic. I think he owns Mansell's 92 Williams that we spoke about earlier privately. Done some laps in it. He builds motorbikes in his shed, all these sort of things. So he is a full on racer. But 24 races in an F1 calendar, maybe. I think he's probably had his fill of it now. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him back doing it, Le Mans type stuff or various different classes like that. It'd be lovely. It'd be great to see him in the Ferrari thing in a couple of years' time with the hypercars at Le Mans or something like that. But I can't see him being back in F1. No. I'd say you'd more likely find him on some random test day at, Mugello or something, driving Mansell's Williams in a pair of plain white overalls with a couple of lads running it out the back of a van and a trailer. Like, I think that you could see him doing that just for the pure love of driving the car, but not a full turn to F1, I don't think.
Ralf Schumacher, guys. He's been, I suppose, a little bit annoyed, to say the least, with Gunter over the decision to have Hulkenberg back. Another thing we didn't talk about yet was Ricciardo going back as reserve driver at Red Bull, which I got to be honest, didn't see that one coming. And the chickens have come home to roost? You leave because you don't fancy it with Max, as a second driver, and now you're like going back as a reserve driver, and possibly with one eye and maybe the year after next.
I seen a great one on that, Kevin. Someone said he left Red Bull because he didn't want to be a number 2 driver. Now he's coming back to Red Bull as a number 3 driver. So it just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, the Ricciardo thing.
But he's had a dose of realism as well, guys. He's had two teams, 4 seasons there, 2 with McLaren, 2 with Renault. He obviously thought he was going to light the place up when he went to Renault. I mean, what was your man's name, the team boss at Renault? He actually got the P45 because of the money he spent bringing Ricciardo to that team for 1 podium.
Yeah, not much. Yeah, for sure. And
so he's had a little dose of reality, and his choices now are, if he wants to stay in the sport, that's the only door that's open to him, and that's probably open. He's going to do work in a simulator. I don't know that he'll be very lucky. We're not going to get another belt of COVID that's going to take lads out of the car the way it was. So he'd be very lucky if he gets a run on tarmac.
Yeah. But to your point, Mike, about where else could he go, and to bring it back to, as Kev said, about the Haas thing, surely there was an option there for him. I mean, I can't imagine if he knocked on Gunther Steiner's door and said, how you fixed, that he would have got anything but a positive reception from Haas. So he obviously chose not to do that. I don't know. I surely he'd be better off on a grid doing something than trailing around the country. Like one of the things he said was he like F1 drivers, it's not a hard life. Don't get me wrong, but traveling the world, going to 24 races and all that goes with it. As they say, they get paid for the travel, and they get paid for the media, and they drive the cars for free, is the kind of the old adage. But to be a reserve driver and to have to do all of the bad bits without getting the the good bit. It just doesn't, especially from someone who's going on about wanting to recharge and get back for the love of it and everything else. Like, Jesus, I can't think of anything worse to be an ex. Well, okay, I can think of loads of things worse, but you know what I mean. To be an ex F1 driver that's kind of got dished out of the sport and then choosing to just be part of the circus without the driving bit. I can't fathom it. Surely he'd been better off jumping into the Haas and trying to throw in a few good performances and work his way back up. But
maybe he still has a bit of a price tag that has. Maybe he was still a bit too rich even then for price for Haas.
But is he not paid out by McLaren anyway? Because he was going to get paid by McLaren next year, one way or the other.
Still probably wanted to.
I'm sure he wanted a few quid, yeah. But look, at the end, he was open to him, I'd imagine. But I don't know, like maybe he knows something that we don't, and Perez mightn't be. The Perez seat might open up again, but I think it's quite likely that we might have seen the last of Ricciardo in an F1 race at the weekend.
Could be, yeah, could be. Maybe that's his hope. Maybe he's hoping. Maybe he's realizing that he jumped a bit too quick. He panicked, a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. He realizes now that there's very few lads out there in that grid who are going to live with Max in a car, and maybe he's hoping that Checo will feel like he did at the end of next season and say, I can't do this, I want to go somewhere else. And maybe that's what he's doing. We don't know. We can't second guess that. Really.
Yeah. Checo is only contracted at the end of next year, isn't he? I think.
The end of 23, yeah. So something might open up there.
It's going to be his line of thinking. Surely, Okay, so bring it back to Ralf Schumacher. He's not impressed with Gunter, Mike. This is something you wanted to talk about. What do you make of it?
Yeah, because I think that when you look at there's so many comments on social media, and I'm someone who's sad to see Mick Schumacher not getting another drive. I think he's come along a lot this season, certainly in the second half of the season, and I thought he's as good as some of the other guys that are around him in similar teams, if not better. But I read somewhere in the week that Mick's entourage has become too much for Haas and for Gunter to handle, and in particular Ralph. Ralph has been arguing almost all the time with Gunter for most of the season around what he should or shouldn't do in support of Mick in the car, and I think that might have been another very, very significant contributory factor to why Haas have said, sorry, Mick, they don't need that pain in the neck all the time either, if it's true, Yeah,
there does. Yeah. I've heard similar things, that there's a bit of a bit of baggage that maybe comes with Mick, whatever that might be and whatever it might mean. The name can be good and can be bad. And that you could live with that baggage if the performances were strong enough, but they're not maybe strong enough to put up with those potential downsides. And if you have someone like Magnussen in the other seat that comes and appears to be a much more just straightforward, no bullshit, no entourage, no baggage, just put me in the car and I'll drive it as fast as I can, and thanks very much, and we'll see you next week. It's probably it's definitely a contributing factor from what I can see. Plus, Haas aren't currently looking for. I mean, Schumacher is not a future world champion. He's not a Lando Norris or a Verstappen or a Piastri or any of these guys that are potentially going to explode into superstars. I think that's fair to say. Is he a very good racing driver? Absolutely. Is he generational talent, as the phrase goes? I don't think so. So without that potential explosive upside, you from Haas's point of view, they're kind of going right. So, but he's a bit of a crasher. It takes him a little while to get on top of the car. We need a safe pair of hands. We don't have the potential of him becoming an absolute world beater and getting bought off us for millions and millions of euros. So let's go with the other option.
Who also crashes cars.
yeah. But there's not many. If you don't want, there's actually not an awful lot of drivers. So once you've decided for whatever reason I don't want Mick Schumacher, there isn't a massive pool of drivers to pull from at the moment.
No,
Really,
no.
So I don't think they got rid of Mick to create a space for Hulkenberg. I think they got rid of Mick for their own reasons, and then looked
Yeah.
around and went,
Hulkenberg's the best of what's available, basically.
Yeah,
I mean, look
it's a
at
subtle but important
exactly.
difference, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look at Williams. Look, Williams. Williams had to give extra laps to Logan Sargent to get him his super license, so they could put him in the car next year. And there's a guy coming out after one season in F2, and I actually think he's going to struggle. I think another year in F2 might have done him the world of good. I think he's going to really struggle. Watching him in free practice there at the weekend and all as well, he didn't seem like he was comfortable.
His junior career is good, but not exceptional. I think he's a lot of he was, I believe, third in British F4 in 2017. I can't just think who was second, but they're also in F1 this year. Can't just think of who that is. But the winner of British F4 is not in F1. He's gone, Jamie Caroline. So there's, and then Sargent went on and he was kind of thirds and fourths and fifths in time. 1 year he was nowhere, but I think he might have only done a part season. But he doesn't have a Piastri level of junior category where it's, Formula Renault winner, Formula 3 winner, Formula 2 winner, and now F1 driver. He doesn't have that. I think not to be too crude about it. I think what he does have is the American passport, which
Absolutely.
is probably a big push, and we all that's part and parcel of it. But I wouldn't be expecting massive things. We could be wrong. I wouldn't be expecting massive things from him though. And he'd probably be one of those that'll come in, do a couple of years, and then might kind of flitter away again. And we've seen plenty of those over the years, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now it might be interesting to see whether or not Mercedes pick Mick up as the third wheel, right?
Was that? Did I hear something that was a deal done that Mick was going to Mercedes as a reserve driver?
It's not being finalised yet or confirmed. It's being talked about. But I think, Mike, the strategy there might be, if Sargent doesn't cut the mustard, that Mick might be drafted in through Toto back to Williams, like the way he did George Russell. Maybe that's the thinking.
Yeah, possibly, and of course Mick has no longer got his Ferrari ties, so I think he parted with the Ferrari Academy earlier in the year, so he's a bit more open to it. But
there are so many puns going to happen if this Sargent thing doesn't work out. It's just dropped with me. Oh my God. And I hope it works out okay for him. But there's a new Sargent in town, and Jesus Christ. Yeah, dad joke central here. I was just thinking there as well, actually. First thing I wanted to do was we put up a Twitter poll, I don't know, 5 days ago, according to this here, about Haas and did they make the right decision dropping Mick Schumacher. 50-50, guys. I'm not joking.
Down the middle.
That's how close it was. Yeah, straight down the middle. Which I thought was quite interesting, of course. But the other thing might be something to finish up on. Latifi didn't go without taking something with him, because we may or may not have got a rap on the knuckles for using content that we shouldn't have used, which may have involved Latifi driving the wrong way in Japan. I'll say no more. I'll tell you about it off air. Yeah.
Well, at least his F1 career wasn't a complete failure.
No.
He got on the Irish F1 show.
That's it, yeah. That's it. If he wants to go on to a chat, there's absolutely no problem either. Poor old Latifi. He'll be missed around the place, guys, if anything.
He seemed to be a very well-regarded driver, I have to say. He seemed to be, he had his struggles, and, he won a few F2 races, which they don't give them away, but he did seem to be well regarded, funny enough, which was interesting to hear when he parted the company, especially maybe in Red Bull quarters where he spun and caused Abu Dhabi last year.
He had some great moments, in fairness. Lads, if this is to be the last episode, is there any little last takeaways before I do come to the rest of any other business part?
I mean, the only thing I'd say it's more looking forward than taking away. I think we could be lined up for a pretty good season next year. The field is definitely closing up. Not just the front few, but further down, we're seeing much smaller gaps in between the cars in qualifying and whatnot. So yeah, I think we could be on for hopefully a closer 2023.
Yeah.
And yeah, if Mercedes can continue their recent form of improvement, and they've probably learned more this year than any of the teams, coming from a weaker position, of course. And if Ferrari can get their house in order, I think we could have a very interesting season with those three. Never mind if anyone else manages to drag themselves up the side and get in the mix too.
Yeah. My takeaway is definitely. I actually think Mercedes are going to bring everything to the show next year. They're going to be a real power, a real force to be reckoned with next season. I do really believe that.
Very much looking forward to it as well, guys. So I think that might nearly be it. We do definitely have one more interview coming before the end of the year, but in terms of the format in which this was set up in, I think that's pretty much it. So look, it's unfortunate Richie's not with us this evening, but Mike, you've been with us a few times. Barry, you've been with us a good few times this year as well. I think maybe you missed the first two and then you come in after that, wasn't it?
I think so, something like that. Yeah.
Like, not to be blowing around Trump, but I think it's gone pretty good. I've enjoyed it, and I just want to say thanks to you guys. You know, you've made yourselves available anytime that I've asked. That goes to yourself, Mike, and to Richie as well. So I appreciate that. And
very welcome.
Yeah,
good fun.
It'll be
It's a bit of fun. It's a bit of fun.
Yeah, and you know that's how it should be received as well. I think because you know, we're not going to turn into prime time.
Just
no, they might watch it instead of prime time, but no, that's the whole of it. So lads, look, thanks a million. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, thanks a million, Barry Rabbit and Mike Dermody and Richard Carney as well. Thanks a million. PFT Travel and Rapco, thanks a million. Without your support, guys, this sort of thing just does not happen. Very, very simply. And the listeners, the viewers, you know, be it those who tuned in and watch our live stream, or those who go back and listen on Spotify and Apple and all those places, anyone who hit the 5 stars, or anyone who left us a review, which some people have as well, all that really does help. We've got to number 1 there as Shar several times this year, and you know, again, you're the ones that that made that happen ultimately. So again, thanks a million. Really enjoyed the first season, and we do have one more special, as I said, before we finish up. But for the last time, that's where we leave it, and we will chat to you again very, very soon indeed. So until then, take care.